Thank you. Welcome to our Lunchtime Learning with Dr. Juanita Cleaver-Simmons and our guest, Felix Rosado. This session is being recorded and will be made available on our stopRED.org website, along with other past sessions, so feel free to check that out. If you haven't already, please mute yourself, just out of respect for our speaker. At the end of today's session, there will be a quick survey. Please take that survey so we can improve these sessions and continue to offer them. Feel free to ask questions throughout. Felix would actually prefer that you do that, so you can take yourself off mute and ask questions or put them in the chat, however you feel comfortable. I also want to thank our funding source. Funds are made available for this project through the Missouri Department of Public Safety and the Missouri Juvenile Justice Advisory Group from funding provided by the U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. I also want to mention that we will not be having a Lunchtime Learning in November, so our next session will be in December, and it will be focused on no kids in cuffs policies. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Simmons.
Good noonday to everyone. Blessings and blessings. We're just so excited that you have stopped to join us today on your lunch. We are honored today to have with us Felix Rosado. He is co-founder of Let's Circle Up and co-coordinator of Alternatives to Violence Project. These are both restorative justice projects that he created or co-created at Grateford State Prison, where he spent 27 years fighting death by incarceration until his freedom in 2022 via executive clemency. He is currently program manager of Healing Futures, a youth restorative justice diversion program, and serves as an instructor at Chestnut Hill College. He is the author of a restorative justice facilitator's manual. And let me tell you, it is phenomenal. Very detailed, very explicit, written in a simplistic way, an everyday manual that you can use in your restorative justice, restorative discipline circles. This youth restorative justice diversion program, which he helps to facilitate, serves as one of the dynamic areas for our inner city children and those who are in the care of youth workers or who are preventing the care of youth workers. He is the author of this dynamic book, and we did list it on our flyer. He is also an instructor at the Chestnut Hill College, and he did receive his degree while incarcerated from Villanova University. He has such a great spirit. I'm just rushing through because I can't wait to hear him, but with great honor and much respect, I present Felix Rosado.
Thank you, Juanita, and thank you, Liz. Happy noonday, is that how you called it? To everyone. Although it's 1 o'clock here in Philadelphia, it's still very much lunchtime. Thank you for spending this time with us. Please feel free to come on camera. I'd love to see some faces alongside all these names. Uh, Let me see. My story begins uh, in the early 70s when my grandmother migrated to Reading, Pennsylvania from Puerto Rico and with her 16 children in search of a better life. Uh, Reading is a small city about an hour northwest of Philadelphia. Back then, it was a huge manufacturing town. The local factories employed a vast majority of the residents in the city. Uh, in the 70s and 80s, all those jobs started to move across seas, and the drug market took its place for the most part. Uh, so my generation started to spring up in the late 70s. There are a lot of us. So we have a huge family and we were pretty close knit. We did everything together. We lived within a 2 block radius of one another and celebrated every holiday, every birthday. Uh, Basically 52 weeks a year, we were celebrating something. Uh, and then as we started to grow up, we started to move to different parts of the city and separate a little bit. I was a straight A student in elementary school. I was deemed gifted. I was projected to be the first one in my family to go to college. My grandmother used to say I was going to be the president of the United States one day. God bless her. She's 98 and still alive. Uh, but somewhere around middle school, what I was seeing to and from school was capturing more and more of my attention than anything that was happening inside the classroom. And little by little, I was getting pulled deeper and deeper into the streets and into a life of crime. And unfortunately, I was never able to pull myself out of that. It started with shoplifting and then breaking into cars and then stealing cars, drinking, smoking weed. And at age 14, I made my first cocaine sale and absolutely fell in love with it. The money, the power, being able to get myself things I wasn't able to get myself before, being able to support my huge marijuana habit that I had at the time. And then I was really good at it. I climbed up the ladder pretty quickly, and before long, I had people working for me, and with more money comes more problems. I found myself having to carry guns and use guns. And at age 18, I landed in jail for a murder. I was subsequently sentenced to death by incarceration, also known as life without parole here in Pennsylvania, and was sent to Graterford State Prison. And I had to figure things out pretty quickly. I still remember my first day there. And Graterford, for anyone who has never heard of it, is pretty infamous. It closed its gates for good in 2018, but it had been around since the early 20th century. Just no, notorious for corruption and violence and drugs. So I got thrown into this place. And I still remember walking down the main corridor my first day with my little cardboard box with a few other guys who had arrived on the bus together. And the corrections officer dropped us off at the cell block. And when we got there was another officer waiting at one of the tables in the middle of the block. And the blocks were a quarter mile long, 550 people on each. And he dumped out a trash bag of wrinkled uniforms onto the table, said, "Find something that fits you," and walked away. And that was my orientation to state prison. So I found something. I made my way over to the control center, found out what cell I was going to be in, came down, met my new cellmate who had 5 years in on his death by incarceration sentence. And we weren't calling it that at the time. It was still known as life. Uh, and like most people, I thought that a life sentence meant 15 years, 10 if you behave. That's what most people walking around in society believe. But then I kept seeing these old guys walk around the block, and we were allowed to wear regular clothes at the time, in clothes from the 70s. And it was 1995. And I remember asking my new cellmate what the story was with these men. And he looked at me as nonchalant as ever and said, he's such and such. He's been here 30 years, and the other guy's name is whatever, and he's been here, you know, 35 or whatever. And I remember my heart dropping. My 18-year-old brain couldn't fathom a human being being caged twice as long as I had been alive. And that's when it became real for me. Uh, I remember asking him, how many life sentences do they have? 2, 3, how many? And he looked me in the eye and said, little brother, they have the same thing you have. And the next day I was in the law library trying to overturn my conviction. uh, I did that for a while. It didn't really go anywhere. And before long, hopelessness started to set in, and I started smoking weed again. And before long, I was up to my street habit, and I was finding myself in a lot of trouble, uh, going in and out of the restricted housing unit, also known as the hole. So solitary confinement for when you break any of the millions of rules inside prison. And so you're there with no property, and you're just all by yourself and in four walls. And I would do 90 days in the hole. I'd come out for a few months, go back. I was trapped in that cycle for about 8 years. And then I had what I like to refer to as my moment of awakening. I was sitting down there serving 90 days for I forget what. And I was laying on my bed one afternoon, and out of nowhere, I just started asking myself some serious questions. I started wondering about my legacy. By this time, I'm 27 now, and I'm starting to think about things I had never thought about before. Like, what is it all going to mean? Is anyone going to remember me when I'm gone? Uh, and then I asked myself, how did I get here? Something I hadn't even questioned before. How did I get from being that straight A student with all that promise to sitting in the furthest place from freedom a human being could be? And I started tracing my steps back, and I ended up in that alleyway across the street from my middle school, standing in that circle with those three other boys, smoking my first marijuana blunt, and a few other events around that time. And I was able to identify those as the moments when my life took a serious downward turn. So I decided right then and there that I needed to move my life in another direction, just as drastic. Uh, and so I decided to stop getting high. I came out of the hole with a new focus. I got back into my law work, this time doing it on my own. At first, I was paying people cartons of cigarettes to file briefs on my behalf, and they were messing my case up. But this time, I was sitting at the computer reading case law for hours and hours a day. Uh, and little by little, I found my way back into court, and hope started to replace despair. I did that for 2 straight years. Just law work, exercise, playing sports, uh, gave up all the bad habits, and I still felt like something was missing. And so I decided to get serious about a relationship with God, and I rediscovered the Catholic faith of my upbringing. I reached out to the chaplain, had a conversation with him, uh, went to mass and received communion that weekend. That was in 2006. I haven't missed one since, even out here on the outside. Uh, And then the same chaplain offered me a job in the prison chapel. And I ended up taking it. And I was the youngest person working there. All my coworkers had been in over 35 years, were 50 plus. Uh, and so I started learning from them what it was like to live a life of meaning and of service to others and of selflessness. So they became my mentors. And a couple of them in particular were part of this program, speaking with boys from a nearby juvenile hall who would get brought into the prison uh, once a month to hear from a group of guys about what their lives could look like if they continued down the paths that they were on. And something about this program, every time I heard about it, caught my interest. And I wanted to do it, but I had a huge fear of public speaking. I didn't think I'd be good at it. I kept talking myself out of it. And one day I was in the cell and it was just so undeniable, the urge, that I went to the staff person who was in charge of that program and told him I was interested before I could talk myself out of it. And he lit up. He said, "Yes, absolutely. You're still kind of young. You're Puerto Rican. You're from Reading. A lot of the boys are from Reading. Yes, 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 yes." He said, "All you have to do is observe. And if you feel comfortable, the following month, you can speak." So that took all the pressure off. I said, "I can absolutely do that." I came and I remember the boys coming in and me thinking to myself, you know, they look the way I looked, 12 years ago when I was going through the juvenile system. I had racked up a bunch of arrests and I had spent time in detention centers. And so one by one, the other guys got up to speak. And I remember sitting there trying to listen to them through the ears of the boys, and I could tell that they weren't really into it. Uh, Not that the guys were doing this intentionally, but they were kind of condescending and weren't really speaking the boys' language. Uh, and so anyway, the last guy, who I later learned always likes to go last, didn't know that I got these previous directions to just chill, looked at me and said, "You go first." And so all eyes turned towards me. And I could have either made a big deal about how I was just there to observe, or I could have just got up and stepped to the center of the circle and started speaking. I ended up doing the latter. And I looked around at them. I said, "Look, 12 years ago, I was in your shoes. I was in a detention center. I heard a lot about what you heard tonight. And this is what happened when I got out." And I walked them through all the steps that led to my incarceration and talked about how the last 12 years had been for me inside there, fighting a death by incarceration sentence. And then at the end, I remember looking them each in the eye and pleading with them. I was almost in tears at this point. And my last words were, "Whatever you do, don't be me." And I sat down, and being my own worst critic, I thought I sucked. And the other guy went, and after it was all over, all the boys started coming over to me, and they were shaking my hand and giving me hugs and telling me how much they felt what I had said. Uh, the staff people from that juvenile hall came over, and they were opening their notebooks and saying, "Look, I quoted you right here." And I couldn't believe it. I was so overwhelmed. I was trying to play it cool on the outside, but inside, I didn't know what to do with myself. I couldn't even believe that that was happening. Uh, as we were walking back to the cell blocks, the other guys were saying, "I've been doing this X amount of years. I never seen anyone get a reaction like that." And by the time I got to my cell block, I wanted to talk to everyone about it. I was just walking up to friends of mine and saying, "Look, yo, you'll never believe what just happened." And I got on the phone. I talked to my mother. And at the end of the night, I locked in my cell and I couldn't sleep. My adrenaline was flowing. I kept replaying the evening over and over in my head. And at some point, I realized that I was happy. I was in that 6 by 12 foot cage experiencing joy for the first time since I was a boy. And I also realized my purpose that night, that it was to use my gifts, my story, whatever I have, to prevent as many other people from making the same mistakes I made. And it was so clear. Uh, and really that skyrocketed me into a life of purpose and service I haven't looked back from since. Uh, I kept I kept litigating in the courts. I spent 9 years uh, arguing an issue that ultimately was denied in the U.S. Supreme Court. In 2012, the same U.S. Supreme Court ruled it was unconstitutional to sentence children to death by incarceration. Pennsylvania had the most, 550, and 300 and something of those came from Philadelphia alone. Most of them were in the prison I was in. And so these were the guys I grew up with. And they were starting to get resentenced and go home. And I wasn't eligible for relief because I committed my crime 5 months after my 18th birthday. So I was still there. All my friends were leaving. I started a group to try to get the law changed in Pennsylvania. So I was working on things on the legislative side of things. I filed a new appeal, and then a new governor came into office and granted clemency to someone who was fighting a death by incarceration sentence for the first time in a quarter century. The door had been completely shut on that process because of something that happened a year prior to my arrest. And then finally, a governor came in and said, "I'm going to try to open this back up." Uh, the guy got out. He was from my prison. He was on the older side of things. He had been in over 35 years, and he was the non-shooter in a felony murder second-degree case. And that quickly became the unwritten standard for who was going to get granted clemency. I didn't fit any of those categories, but I decided to take a shot. And so I filed an application in 2017. 2019, I started going through the process. In 2020, I went before the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons. And you need all 5 of them to vote yes so that you can proceed to the governor. I ended up getting 3 out of 5 votes and was denied and was devastated. My family was devastated. I had gotten the furthest of anyone my age. I had over 150 support letters from people in the community. I had job offers, no victim opposition. My district attorney was supporting me. So we had done all this work, and it wasn't enough. In 2021, I filed for reconsideration that got denied, and I was about to start working on a second application. And it would have taken me like 3 years to get to where I just was. So I wasn't thrilled about that. But then I had heard of someone who had attempted a second reconsideration request, which didn't go anywhere, but it let me know that it was possible. So I started working on one of those. And in 2022, I filed it. The board accepted it, granted me another hearing. And this time when they voted, I got all 5. And I proceeded to the governor. And on July 14th, 2022, the governor commuted my sentence. And 4 days later, on July 18th, 2022, I walked out of prison, a free person for the first time since I was 18. And it's been an amazing ride. I jumped straight into my current job as program manager of Healing Futures, Philadelphia's first pre-charge youth restorative justice diversion program. I found my life partner. I bought a house. I got engaged. We just had a daughter 3 months ago. Her name is Jubilee. And I'm teaching at Chestnut Hill College. I'm teaching restorative justice at Chestnut Hill College, and possibly going to be working at a new school come spring. So all that to say, life is good. I can talk more about the restorative justice program I manage, but in short, it gives me an opportunity to talk to my younger self every day at work. I get to work with young people between ages 12 and 17 and try to share with them what I might have needed to hear when I was going through all of that as a person their age. So I'll stop there because I want to hear from you all. I would love to answer any questions, but also just feel free to comment. I'd love for this to just be a dialogue.
This is Rick.
Hi,
Thank
Rick.
you. I really, that your story resonates with me. And so I'm curious. I've got a nephew that is right now is in state penitentiary, and I go down there once every other month just to support him. And he did something really serious, and so he got 30 years. And he comes up for his parole for the first time in 2029. He's 26, and I'm trying to get him to really understand in going in front of this parole board, because it's not guaranteed that he's going to get a date. And there's days that I read the paper and people die in prison and they've been there for 20 years, and so I'm trying to prep him for all this. And just because what I do, I work with victims, and I'm just curious, when they denied you the first time, did they give you reasons as to your denial or what you could have done better to in front of the board to convince them of that 5 instead of the 3? And so I'm trying to take some lessons from your story to support and help him as he prepares his journey. And again, he seriously made a major mistake in his life. And I won't announce it here, but it's serious enough to where he got 30 years. And I'm his, I'm not gonna say mentor. I'm the one who's really trying to get him prepared for whatever happens in 2029. But and really saying to him, hey, you may not get it may be 20 years before you see yourself out of this instead of the first 7 years. So just trying to, in your view of how you went in front of that board, some of the things that you thought you could have done better or things that you learned from it to prepare you for the next one.
Thank you, Rick. First of all, your support of your nephew is invaluable. Having someone come and visit you, in a place that does everything in its power to prevent those kind of connections is really important. It's a lifeline for many people, and in some cases, all they have. Because it's easy to get swallowed up by the prison and become institutionalized and forget that there's an outside world at all. It's what the system wants, really. So thank you for that. I went before the Pennsylvania Board of Pardons, a whole different thing than parole. It's very political. There's 2 elected officials on the board, so by nature, it's political. It's arbitrary. They do not have to give you a reason for denial, and they do not. There's no accountability. You're looking at a miracle right now, right? The door kind of shut right after I had my hearing. Long story short, it was 2 weeks before the Democratic primaries. Then Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman was running for U.S. Senate, and then Attorney General Josh Shapiro was running for Pennsylvania governor. So they were 2 members of the board at the time, still trying to appear somewhat left before the Democratic primaries. And after that, just shot straight to the middle. And, things haven't been the same since. But anyway, your nephew just needs to be honest, be accountable. He's 26. I mean, his brain is, according to the neuroscientists, just fully developing now. So he's fairly young, hopefully he gets it. I'm not sure how long he's been in, but I know that any of these boards, right, all they want to hear is remorse. They want to hear that you understand the impact of your actions and that you're not going to do it again. If he can convey that clearly, you know, over and over even, that would do him well. Uh, they you can't undo the past, and he just has to, make peace with that and, say, look, I can't bring back whatever was lost, but what I can do from this point on is everything in my power to make sure that, that harm doesn't continue happening in my community. And it's important to make the case that him being in the community is no longer a liability, but an asset. And the stronger of a case he can make in regards to that, the better his chances. But I'm glad he does have an opportunity for parole. In Pennsylvania, when you get sentenced to life, there's no parole. That's why I call it by its true name, death by incarceration. I was a hospice volunteer. I sat bedside with men as they took the last breaths of their death by incarceration sentences. I know what that looks like. So for him to have an opportunity at age 26 to gain his freedom is a blessing.
Thank you.
Mhm. Hi, Keita.
Hi. Your story is very inspirational, and I work with foster youth, and so we see a lot of issues with the juvenile system and just, I guess, I feel like they are kind of not targeted, but it's just kind of expected that they are gonna go into this path, and I really don't know how we can change that narrative, but I do have some personal your story definitely resonated personally, and so I wanted to see what your thoughts were. I have a brother who is only 16, and he has recently gotten into some trouble. Last year, my 16-year-old brother, when he was 15, and my 17-year-old brother, when they were 16, got into some trouble with just association, where someone else had done something, and so they were kind of let off the hook. And we were like, hey, listen, you guys need to take this serious. This is a big deal. And they're just like, oh, they don't care. They don't care about that little stuff. Well, now this year, my 16-year-old brother, he was caught with a assault rifle. And so he's on probation. Again, very lucky not to be put into jail. And so he's on house arrest, or I think that's what's called. But he has the ankle monitor, and so I'm just trying to figure out, what do we do so that they can not end up in prison or juvenile detention centers? Like, how do you get them to click that this is serious stuff and you're on a path to destruction? It's very hard to get through to them, because they see, when I asked, why do you have a gun? What do you need a gun for? Oh, well, we have to have it. If we don't have it, we're like, they feel like that's the thing to do. They're walking down the street, I don't want to have to use it, but I don't want to get caught without one. And it's just like, how do we get them to realize that they don't have to even be involved in that life whatsoever, and to make better choices so that they are able to not end up in life in prison, because they don't take it serious. So I don't know, how do we get them to take it seriously?
Thank you, Keita. So much to unpack there. It is serious. They're up against a beast of a system that wants to swallow up every poor Black and brown kid it can, and a few white kids here and there as well. But if you know the history of this, like, who it targets, and so I try to give the young people I work with here some amount of political education as well, to let them know what they're really up against, you know, and to let them know that their decisions aren't taking place in a vacuum. Uh, there are large forces influencing them, pushing them in a direction, you know, the cradle to prison pipeline that you described earlier. And, you know, we need to interrupt that any way we can. Uh, you know, the juvenile system does give a lot of breaks, if you want to call them that, you know. But like I didn't take heed to any of the, you know, the warnings or the writing on the wall or any of that. The more I got away with, the worse I got. You know, I didn't wake up one day and just pull out a gun on someone and pull the trigger. You know, it started with quote unquote little things, right? Shoplifting, breaking into cars, stealing cars, you know, living a lifestyle that normalized hurting others and hurting yourself to the point where you become numb to it. And, you know, I don't know how much people know about Philadelphia, but we have like over 500 murders a year in the city. Like at least 2 a year, a block away from where I live. You know, they've been, and the response is to villainize young people. We have a current mayor who's like hell bent on describing these kids as everything but kids in the media. You know, they're out here wearing hoodies and ski masks in like 90-degree weather, right? Carrying big guns, and it's not because they're evil or, you know, bad or anything like that. These kids are afraid. You know, when I sit down and talk with them, you know, and they're able to take the mask off, the literal mask and the metaphoric mask as well, and just like really be open with me. They tell me I'm scared. You know, I can't leave my house without this on, you know, or something's going to happen to me. And so I get that, you know, and it's really sad that our youth are living under these conditions where they can't even be kids. You know, they have to worry about everything else but being kids. You know, so I, I would keep talking with whoever, you know, you have around you, who who whoever you have any kind of influence over, and just like really explain to them that, you know, this system is out to get them, and they need to work extra hard, you know, to not fall victim to it. But aside from that, we need an overhaul of our entire society, our political system, our economic system. You know, there's mountains and mountains of research telling us that poverty is linked to crime, and it's a problem that could be fixed. You know, it's not about lack of resources. We're sending billions and billions of dollars across seas to fund wars, you know, a fraction of which could give everyone in this country health care. You know, I'll get off my soapbox for now, but I think we all know, you know, uh, you, what I'm talking about. You know, people's needs aren't met. And as long as people's needs aren't met, we're going to be seeing these kind of harms take place in our communities over and over and over. So yes, it's important to interrupt individual cycles of harm whenever we can, but until these structural, you know, ills are addressed, we're going to keep seeing these problems.
Thank you. We have a couple questions in the chat. It seems that youth are creating major acts of felony at earlier ages now. What should youth care workers do to help to speed up diversion?
Youth care workers,
Yes.
to speed up diversion. I mean, district attorney offices and courts, you know, whoever's in charge of diverting cases, you know, I guess it's different in every jurisdiction. but they have to buy into it. They have to really believe in it and make it their mission to divert as many cases as possible. We currently have a district attorney here in Philadelphia who's about it, but you know, he could lose an election and all that can change, you know, really quickly. But you know, I believe that the earlier the intervention in the system, the better, because the more contact they have with the system, the worst outcomes. And it's a system that traps you and you never really get out of. Uh, Even when you do your time or you finish up your house arrest or whatever, right? Like that record's there, it haunts you, it creates you know, the kind of situation where you're likely to reoffend. You know, the system has a 2/3 recidivism rate. It always has since the first people were released from Walnut Street Jail back in the 1700s. There hasn't been a year when the recidivism rate was not 2/3, you know, and like one has to ask oneself, you know, what other company would be allowed to exist with a 2/3 failure rate for this long? It's not failing. It's doing exactly what it's designed to do. It's actually it's doing pretty well. Sorry if I rambled there and didn't answer the question.
No, you're fine. This one kind of piggybacks on that. So where can someone find support resources in our cities to help our family members who are getting out stay out?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be different in every city. Like most of this work is being done by nonprofits. Like maybe some of it is government funded. I mean, it depends. And the thing with that too, like a few years back, reentry was a buzzword. All kind of funding was getting poured into so-called reentry programs. That kind of has dried up. You know, it went to like defunding police for a little bit. That didn't last long. Now it's about youth. I'm seeing like youth as the buzzword everywhere. You know, so different things, you know, are trendy for the moment, and like funders and foundations are, you know, giving money to like different causes. But I I can tell you for myself, I didn't have any support from any of these programs that are out here getting millions of dollars for quote unquote reentry. Uh, the guys who came home before I came home were my reentry program. They were the ones calling me and texting me and asking me if I was okay and taking me shopping and it advising me on what bank to open an account at, what credit card to get. You know, they were my lifeline. And so now I'm able to do that for people who come home. And I have been able to do that for guys who got out in the last 2 years who I was on the inside with. But you know, that's you know, that's just organic. That's grassroots, right? You know, that's not like a solution to the whole problem. You know, so I would just look for, you know, what's available. Scour the internet, you know, see what kind of programs are out there. Some provide like material support, you know, employment, clothes, you know, a job interview, training. So a lot of groups do a lot of different things. I think it's just a matter of like finding out, you know, what they are and connecting people with them.
Thank you. Teresa, you have a question?
Thank you. Could you elaborate, tell us a little bit about Let's Circle Up?
Yeah. Yeah. So I co-founded a restorative justice education project on the inside called Let's Circle Up with another brother who's in year 40 of his death by incarceration sentence still, Charles Boyd. So definitely want to name him and bring him into this space as well. I wouldn't be sitting here without him. And the fact that he remains in there is a shame and a tragedy. But we discovered that we had an equal passion for restorative justice and decided to create something to introduce as many other people in the prison to restorative justice as possible. So we crafted this 10-session workshop tried to make it experiential and lively and engaging and fun. And it caught on. I mean, guys really loved it. And before long, we couldn't walk around the hallways at Gradeford without someone walking up to us and handing us their name and number on a piece of paper, asking to get signed up. So that workshop exploded into a full-blown like project within a couple of years, with a menu of workshops and events and activities. And you know, we continued to do that work, and eventually I wrote the facilitators manual for our intro to RJ workshop, which just got published over the summer by Living Justice Press, which Juanita spoke about in her introduction. And so now we're able to replicate and, you know, spread it. We recently got our 501c3 nonprofit status 2 summers ago, and I'm going to be moving in the direction over the next year of, you know, building that up out here and getting a building and doing workshops and adding a few other parts to the project as well. But it's been a blessing and a joy and a gift to be able to have facilitated, I don't know how many workshops at this point, and have met, you know, a good 2,000 or more people who have completed at least one of our workshops. My current job, though, is program manager of a youth restorative justice diversion program called Healing Futures, which is separate from Let's Circle Up. But whereas that was education, here I'm actually facilitating restorative justice processes, bringing together young people with the people they harmed, to talk about what happened and to come up with a plan for what needs to happen to put things more right. So I did the education part of things, you know, for 18 years, and now I'm in the practice.
Can you expand on that anymore?
Yeah. So here at Healing Futures, we get our referrals from the district attorney's office of young people who've been arrested for a variety of different things. And we reach out to their caregivers, set up a meeting, enroll them in our program, and then walk them through the whole process. We call our young people responsible youth instead of offenders, and our people harmed as people harmed instead of victims. We try to move away from that that binary and those harmful labels to describe the people we work with. So we start working with our responsible youth immediately after the enrollment meeting. They come in once a week for sessions with the facilitation team to explore their values, who their people are, who they are really. We get into accountability. Eventually, we start crafting an apology letter together. And so while we're doing all that, we're also meeting with the person harmed to see what their needs are and what kind of supports we can connect them with. And then when everyone's ready, we bring them together in what we call a restorative community conference. And we sit in circle somewhere out in the community. We pick a location, preferably close to where the harm occurred, as a way of rewriting the narrative of what took place there. And we have the responsible youth and a supporter of or two of theirs, the person harmed or persons harmed, if it's more than one, and supporters of theirs, 2 members of the community who we select, and then 2 facilitators from the Healing Futures team. We use the restorative justice process known as CIRCLE. So we have a talking piece and a centerpiece, and we have some guidelines and values, and it's a safe space where people can be honest and vulnerable. And we talk about what happened. We give the person harmed an opportunity to talk about the impact of that harm on them, we turn it over to the responsible youth's caregiver or whoever their supporter is to talk about what all this has been like for them. And then we give the floor to the responsible youth so they can read their letter and talk about whatever else they feel moved to say. And then we open up the floor and questions and answers can be exchanged. The community members will chime in at that point. Facilitators might say a few words. And once we feel like we're at a good place, we turn our attention to developing the restorative plan. So this is the concrete action that the young person then has to do to put things, as we like to say in restorative justice, more right. And it's usually some kind of volunteering in the community with some other community partner or organization that we know. This is not to be confused with community service or a punishment that's handed down by a court. This needs to benefit everyone, the responsible youth, their loved ones, person harmed, and the community at large. Once they complete their plan, the case is closed. We reach back out to the district attorney's office and let them know, and the charges get dismissed. It's as if they were never arrested, and they can go on with their lives, hopefully happily and successfully, and without the stain of a criminal record or the trauma of having spent any time inside a cage. We've had one person out of close to 50 so far get rearrested for something. So I'm not sure what percentage that is, but it's much, much lower than 2/3 that the system currently possesses. And then even after the case is over, like, it's not over. So I still get texts and phone calls from young people who completed a year ago, a year and a half ago. And so we try to support as much as we can. And before we even get started, we do a full needs assessment with the young person and try to gather and share as many resources with them as possible. Because we understand that diverting a case only means so much if everything else in their lives continues to remain the same. So we really take on the work of like social work as well. This organization is underfunded, understaffed. We're a little team of 5 doing the work of like 20. But I love coming to the office every day. Nothing brings me more joy.
Thank you. There was a question on what criteria do you use for youth selected for the program?
Well, the district attorney's office is the one that makes those calls. They do have criteria. There are certain harms that are ineligible for diversion. And right now, anything involving a gun is ineligible, mostly because of the political nature of that issue here in the city. We're trying to make the case that, those cases should be coming to restorative justice. In our mind, the more severe the harm, the more need for restorative justice there is. But we're a program that's been around two years and some change, and we actually have someone with us now who's doing a report on the first 2 years of this program to help us further make the case for more serious harms.
That's a great point. I like that. The more severe the harm, the more the need is for restorative justice. We had another one. I am a juvenile officer in Missouri, and we can only act on reports from law enforcement. How do we as juvenile officers get through to law enforcement that not every juvenile they encounter needs to be incarcerated or in our juvenile detention center?
Just for clarity, what is a juvenile officer?
It's similar to a probation officer,
Okay.
but for kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, the police department, that's a whole other animal, right? Yeah. It's hard because the institution is what it is, right? It's the direct descendant of slave patrols. And we fool ourselves by thinking that, good people can be put in positions of leadership or, more training or more diversity or any of that is going to change that institution. It's doing what it's designed to do, you know. So I wouldn't put a lot of energy into trying to, you know, change officers' minds on who to arrest or how to arrest. You know, I'm just I'm just going to be, you know, clear about it. I'm an abolitionist. I'm trying to work towards a world where none of that exists, and you know, where there's less harm in the world, and we're dealing with it in community when it does happen. Because these institutions cause more harm than good in most cases. But I mean, yeah, if they weren't arrested in the first place, that would be great. Then there'd be no, you know, need for diversion. We got a lot of school related incidents here, and you know, I remember a time when these kind of things were being dealt with by the school. Like, stop calling the cops. It just drives me crazy. You know, we're getting these like fights and stuff, and yeah, that's wrong, you know, but you know, to cause more harm to a person who caused harm, to show them that causing harm is wrong, is absolutely the wrong approach. Uh, but you know, look, keep making change wherever you can in your sphere of influence. You know, you know, talk, make the case, share stories, right? Anecdotes move people more than numbers or data. I'm learning, you know, so if you do have like influence over officers, you know, talk with them. Like I wouldn't say that's a complete lost cause if that's how I came across earlier. But you know, like in the meantime, with these, you know, these whole, you know, these institutions, you know, just need to be uprooted and overhauled. Sorry, that wasn't like
No,
clear.
no, you're fine. I appreciate your
Yeah.
honesty. Is there a particular age of youth that you work with?
12 to 17.
12 to 17.
And it's like we've had a 12-year-old, and I questioned whether or not like we should have even taken the case. Like, teaching a 12-year-old about accountability, you know, just doesn't, you know, seem right to me. When, you know, well, I'll get on my little soapbox for a second here. So we were getting a slew of auto theft cases about a year ago because of this TikTok challenge, right? So kids learned how to steal Kias and Hyundais with a USB cord. And, you know, videos were being posted all over the place, and, you know, kids were doing this. And so we're getting all these kids, and they're, you know, coming to us, and, you know, we're bringing them together with the car owners, and they're working it out and all that. But it was never lost on me at one point during that whole craze that Hyundai and Kia purposefully left out a piece to save some money that led to all this madness. TikTok and YouTube, none of these corporations ever had to be accountable for anything, but the young black kid in the city of Philadelphia has to be accountable, you know? So yeah, I want them to understand, you know, that harming people is wrong, taking things from people is wrong, but I move with a lot of grace in these cases because I know the conditions these harms took place in, and how the institutions responsible for it never one day have to be accountable.
Wow, thank you. I think we are out of time. Dr. Simmons, do you have any final thoughts?
This has been phenomenal. We appreciate you so, Mr. Rosado. As you presented, I kind of went through the checklist of what I found in your facilitator's manual. And so it's amazing to see this work as you go through it. and experience it. We appreciate you. You've been phenomenal. And audience, we love and appreciate your participation, and do feel free to call on us. And you see that the survey is there. Our focus now for this new term is that of relationship building. And so we want to continue that theme on. And with that, thank you so much for
If you-
being here. Felix, we appreciate you. I think you're saying something. He froze out. Okay. I'm hearing him, he's saying something, but he's been wonderful and the audience has been wonderful and you stayed with us all the way through.
Can you hear me
let's-
now?
Yes.
Yeah,
All right. I don't know what that was, but I'm putting my email and phone number in the chat if anyone wants to reach out directly.
That's great. Thank you so much.
I'm a little slow here, sorry.
it's there.
Okay, there it goes. All right,
Okay.
much love, blessings to all, and thank you for spending this lunch with us.
Thank you.
All
We appreciate you all.
right.